Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
Yvette Bananno-Tharp is the head of Louisiana Cane Land Distillers. She's here to talk not only about her wonderful products, which I sampled at the Fancy Food Show, but how she was able to use the Louisiana State University's facilities to improve and update her products. Yvette, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Don, for having me. I appreciate it.
Without further ado, I'm going to turn the show over to Ann Daw.
Thank you, Don. Again, Yvette Bananno-Tharp is Director of Everything Delicious, I love that title, for Cane Land Distilling's line of food products, which include praline rum cakes and spiced rum pecans made with the distillery's signature rums. Well, thank you, Yvette, and welcome to Food and Wine Insider.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure meeting you guys at the Fancy Food Show this year, and it's certainly, just an honor to be presenting our brand new products. So, again, it was just great to meet you guys, and I'm just so glad that you stopped by our booth and had a sample of our products.
Fantastic. Let's first talk about Cane Land Distilling and their baseline products. I understand that the Tharp family's Alma Plantation and Sugar Mill, where Cane Land Distilling sources molasses, sugar, and cane juice for its spirits, has been in the family for 200 years. The company produces rum, which is R-H-U-M, and rum. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing rum and rum correctly, or it's rum and rum, but you'll help me with that.
After a couple of cocktails, it's all rum.
That's right. It's probably all rum. Please tell us about the difference between the two, the R-H-U-M and the R-U-M.
Sure. So my husband, Walter Tharp, his mother's side of the family has owned Alma Plantation since 1859. So they do roughly about 500 million pounds of sugar, 10 million gallons of molasses annually. And so we have no shortage of rums, raw products for our rums. The R-H-U-M rum is agricultural rum, and that is made from the fresh press of cane juice. So what happens is the grind or the harvest season of sugar occurs between October and January. So when they press the fresh cane juice, we take tankers of that back to our facility, Cane Land, which is in Baton Rouge. We're about 15 miles away, and we put that into fermentation. And from that fresh cane juice, we make R-H-U-M rum. They make it in the Caribbean islands. It was almost a way of not extracting the sugar and molasses to make standard rum, R-U-M, but it was almost a quicker process of taking this cane juice. What is unique about this spirit is the cane juice has a very short shelf life. It will rot after about a 10, 12-hour period. So there's no way of stopping that process by heating it, cooling it, boiling it, freezing it. So either it has to go into fermentation to make alcohol, or it has to go into pasteurization to make it shelf stable. So because we have the source and we own the source, we are the largest producers of rum agricole in the continental United States. So for us to be producing that rum agricole on such a large base makes us very unique. And as far as the RUM, sugar and molasses is it's not perishable. It can be shipped all over the world. But from those two ingredients, we do make a spice rum, a silver rum, an argente, kind of like a Cuban style. We make a cinnamon flavored rum. All natural products go into that rum. And then, of course, our rum agricole. So we're very proud of our products because we are family-owned, estate bottled. It's very difficult to find that in the spirits world. It's obviously pretty evident in the wine world, but to own the entire process in making liquor, it's very unusual.
Well, that's really helpful, Yvette, and I really appreciate your explaining that. And the baseline, I had no idea that the largest rum supply in North America is in Baton Rouge. You are professionally trained in the culinary arts, and you formerly owned Bananno's Fine Catering and Yvette Marie's Cafe. How is your new business making praline rum cakes and spiced rum pecans different?
Well, I've been in the parents-owned restaurants when I was growing up, so I have to say that I was probably 6 years old, and by the time I was 10, 11, my parents actually had me in the back of the house peeling potatoes and slicing lemons with the automatic machine, and so I definitely started way before the culinary school. But having the experience and being acclimated with working in the kitchens and knowing food and production. When it came time for Cane Land to release its spirits, my husband Walter walks in with a box of business cards, and he said, "I've got a job for you." And I said, "Well, I'm not looking for another job." And he goes, "No, you're going to be the director of everything delicious. I've created this title for you, and you're going to make packaged food items for us." So, of course, I jumped on it. I mean, when you're in the food service, you never know where your career is going to turn, and I welcomed the opportunity. So being in Baton Rouge, which Baton Rouge has always embraced my family and my craft, so I'm always so appreciative of the city. But going to LSU was just it was basically a no-brainer. I knew the people there. I knew they had the facilities. I knew that we could get the product on the shelf with minimal investment, and that's what I did. I approached the incubator and just said, "Look, we've got these two food products we want to do," and they said, "Well, we've never allowed alcohol on our campus legally in our kitchen." So we said, "Well, we're gonna, we'd like to get the approval," and we did, and we started doing production runs, and we produced the praline rum cakes, which is like that 7.4 ounce 2 serving, and then the spiced rum pecans, which is a slow baked spiced pecan that we hand packaged both of those items right there at the LSU incubator.
So as Dawn mentioned, you've been working on these products with LSU's Ag Center Food Incubator since 2017. Talk a little bit about that collaboration.
Sure. Well, the LSU school, the Ag Center, the Food Incubator, they're equipped with state-of-the-art equipment. They have the food scientists that once we do the submission of our recipes, we gather all the raw materials. They put those items, once they're prepared, in their biometric chambers to determine shelf life, which is obviously really important when you're doing shelf-stable products. And they're doing all of our nutrition for us. So we're working closely with them, and they have all of the commercial equipment, all FDA approved, Board of Health certified. So I go in there with my crew. And again, you really need to have some back culinary experience when you're getting ready to bake 1,000 individual cakes. Making sure you have all of your ingredients there and they're of the quality that you're wanting. And then that it's handled properly. It's cooled, it's vacuum sealed, it's boxed. They provide our case storage for us, so our distributors pick up our products directly from there, so they're not handled improperly. And just their overall support of just, it's interesting when I'll go and do a tasting and I'll say, yeah, we're from Cane Land and these are our food products. We're the only one in Louisiana doing ancillary food items with our spirits. And where are you producing? I say LSU Incubator. And they just, it's almost like this pride they have of, wow, you're using the LSU facility. And they have about 70 tenants in that space. So everyone's kind of feeding off of each other's culinary interest, and you go into the scientist labs, and they're creating just some unbelievable, innovative products that are, under the radar right now until they're exposed to, the public for distribution. So it's very exciting. It's, we're looking to do a few other products using the rum, and, we're anxious to see where those items end up as well.
So the LSU Ag Center Food Incubator, they help you both from determining your shelf life, your nutritional information, and they're a pilot facility, it sounds like, to produce your products. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. You're actually doing all of the work, which, on my both of my food products, it says it's truly handmade because, we are in there with a staff of anywhere from 8 to 10, and we'll start at 7 in the morning and end up around 8 or 9 in the evening doing rounds of production. And so it's not, we don't use machines. Everything is actually handmade. But they're also that source of helping us find the distributors, helping us use marketing tools, and helping us, even with promotion and advertising. It's ironic that 2 years ago I was at the Fancy Food Show, and I was on the other side. I was looking at products and boxes and packaging and, forecasting what my brands were going to look like. And then, a month before Fancy Food, I get a call from LSU Incubator, and they selected 3 of us to come and represent our products at the show. So it was definitely it was a big moment for me to be an exhibitor. When 2 years prior I was just little fish in big pond, looking to see what everyone else was doing. So it was definitely a privilege.
Well, we've been talking with Yvette Bananno-Tharp, who is the director of Everything Delicious for Cane Land Distilling line of food products. So, are you able to get into the facility at any time, or do you have to sort of schedule a day or schedule days when you can be at the facility?
You have to schedule time. So you work with the instructors and the attendants. You put forecasted dates on their schedule, and then you start your planning. You're receiving all of your dry products and raw materials from Cisco. Food trucks are coming in. You're checking in your product, and of course scheduling my staff. And and then it's full days of production. So they have a bottling facility. It's pretty massive, and they're getting ready to open up a brand new facility. So they've invested a lot of money. It definitely gives the school kudos when these products get out on a small base and then ultimately picked up by a packer, and then their distribution is more widespread. So they take that pride, and they enjoy seeing that growth. They don't want you to stay there forever. So it's a lot of people can easily, I don't want to say easily because none of this is easy steps, but to go to a packer and say, hey, I've got a great recipe, sure, we'll produce it, but once you're sitting on 5,000 cases, where are they going to be sold? Where is your clientele? How are they going to move off the shelf? And again, a smaller financial investment will allow you to put small scale out there, have the customer review and be receptive of what your products are. And, we honestly didn't know if both of these products were going to be successful out the gate. And, good thing, and thankfully they were. So now it's just kind of revved us up into what are we going to do next? What other two products are not available on the shelf right now? Because our 2 products, there's nothing like it on the market, which, it certainly helps that we're using a very high quality rum in both of our food products.
Sure. And so today, how much product are you able to make in the facility? When do you think you'll move to either self-manufacture or co-pack? Because that's a big step.
It is. And another benefit of being at the Fancy Food Show, I was approached by one packer, and then I knew who I wanted to go see once I got to the show. Both were extremely receptive. The cakes are they're a lot more time consuming. To find a packer on the cakes is going to be more of a challenge, but for me to release at least one of those items, which would be the pecans first, to a packer to make sure that the quality is exactly what we're getting on a hands-on basis, is going to be the next step. Right now, we have distribution out of New Orleans with Peroni & Son, and they distribute Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, parts of Alabama, and then other customers we're doing drop ship case. So, once you get to a packer, you have definitely more, you have more velocity, and you have more of a reach, and that's where other brokers and distributors come in handy as far as getting your product out there. And of course, you can order online. We'll bring it right to your door.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it leads to a really important question in terms of how you're distributing the products, and you're doing that yourself. What's been your strategy? Are you focusing on particular retailers? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because certainly one affects the other. You have to be able to make the product to get it into distribution, and yet you need the distribution to be able to sell the product. So it's what's been your approach in terms of where you want to be distributed, and therefore what retailers or food service buyers are you really focused on?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up, because again, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can produce all day long, but how are you going to get it out there and effectively sell it? That's the big objective. Certainly fortunate enough that Cane Land released their products, and they are starting their distribution. We have only been open since May of last year, and my products did not hit the shelf until the first week of December. So we are brand spanking new, but I'm basically following the map of Cane Land. So when they're on the shelves in the grocery store, I can easily walk in and say, hey, these are the two products that we're making with this rum, and it gives us, more shelf, appearance. And so they have distribution right now in 9 states. So we're following them. Because they're a premium product, we had to produce our boxes, our packaging, our product to be cohesive with theirs. So in doing so, it's been a fairly easy presentation and acceptance on us getting into those higher-end grocery stores. Liquor stores have definitely been our big niche as well. For the holidays, keeping up with production was a real challenge. We really could not. So we were, we couldn't take on more locations. Then we were able to catch up, and then Mardi Gras hit us, and we were sold out again. So it's like, having Cane Land Spirits as a catalyst of getting us through the door, and then for us to kind of follow suit and say, hey, look, we have these other two products. We know the big hitters are able to, our larger spirit companies have their food products much easier for them to produce. And, we're just kind of a smaller scale, but we're finding that that's the most effective way to get our marketing and placement out there.
And what are you, how are you able, or what are you doing to get consumers to know about your products?
Well, we've just started a website for the food products. Obviously, you can go to caneland.com and you'll see all of their spirits, which you can order their spirits in 32 states if your state by law allows it. So our products are on their site. I went ahead and started my own website, Facebook, Instagram, a social platform. I don't have the restrictions being a non-alcoholic product. All the alcohol is cooked off in both of our products. So our demographic is a larger reach than the Cane Land Spirits can offer. So, we've just been doing a lot of direct to customer too. I mean, I love going to the farmers markets, which, being on the chef side, I was there doing cooking demos. So now when people see my name and face, it's kind of like, wow, she's doing packaged items, all under that same culinary umbrella. And my name has been beneficial in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, the North Shore, and I've certainly relied on that to give our product credibility. But so I think it's always best in the culinary world to put the product in the guest's mouth and get their response. I do believe in doing a lot of charitable work, and that being said, doing taste of for either Cancer Society or any of the nonprofit events, which will allow us to come in, and they'll even on some instances allow us to sell direct to the customer at that point. But they can at least say, hey, I was at a charitable event and I had a chance to try the pecans and cakes, and this will be a great hostess gift for the holidays, or they'll see us in the store and then they'll pick us up again. So I believe heavily on that approach of getting our product out there.
Wonderful. Well, we've been talking with Yvette Bananno-Tharp, who's Director of Everything Delicious for Cane Land Distilling. I'd be curious, Yvette, to know what you have found the biggest challenges to date.
Well, it's so funny because, looking back on it now, and when you're in the thick of dealing with setting up an alcohol and distillery, you don't know what you don't know. And I know that's to be said about a lot of businesses when they're startup, but I'll tell you, Walter and I, we were fortunate enough to be invited to the daughter of Zacapa rum in Guatemala about 6 years ago. And Walter was talking to the Botran family that in Zacapa, and he was saying how much sugar and molasses that his family produces. And they produce at Zacapa, a fraction of the raw source. And they simply said to Walter, well, why don't you make rum? And, Walter and I got back on the plane, and he said, I think I'm going to take my family's crop and do something with it. I mean, for all of these years, they've sold the product just to refineries. And but Walter said to me, he said, if I can tell you how many people said, oh, your family's in the sugar business, why don't you make candy bars? And I said, well, you've got a valid point there. So from that point, he started, creating the idea of doing this distillery. And there were literally laws in the books since Prohibition in East Baton Rouge Parish, state of Louisiana, that had to be repealed before we could even start construction on our building and, applying for licenses to do our mass quantity of spirits. So from that point, it was just kind of like one hurdle after the next. And, it's been a ride, after, once we opened 5 years later, for me, taking their hard work and creating the spirits and getting into the food aspect of it, it was much easier for me. I was able to turn around and do it much more quickly. You're just dealing with a lot of, ABC board, TTB, and just a lot of challenges when you're dealing with the alcohol piece of it. Yeah.
There's so many categories where if you don't somehow add value, or do value-added products, you do get in the kind of commodity mode, and it's all a function of whatever the price is on the marketplace. So it's really smart to sort of go into distilling and now into further value-added products with your rum cakes and your spiced rum pecans. Do you see the products as potentially also available in food service, maybe hotels, high-end restaurants, or do you see it mostly as an at-home experience? I'm just curious why or why not.
Well, at this moment, it's strictly retail. Our product is it's again, because we're using high quality spirits. It has a higher price point. We did find that the consumer was looking for a larger cake. So we are doing production test runs right now on producing a larger cake just for the holiday season. And for us, the holidays are Thanksgiving, Christmas, and carries us over into Mardi Gras. So we are doing a larger cake. I'm not forcing that food service at this time. We did have a couple restaurants reach out to us, and honestly had to say our price point is much higher than what they were probably looking for. So as of right now, it's just more of a higher end, like you're saying, home experience, and we're okay with that. It's also very interesting. People come to the distillery and then they don't drink. So I see them grabbing a box of the pecans or cakes to take home or give as a gift. I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, and they ate rum cake for about a year before we perfected the recipe. And they would come home from school and they'd be like, "Do we have any more rum cake?" I'm like, "I don't know if this is good, that you're coming home every day and asking for rum cake." But yeah, it's and I just want to bring up another tidbit. What's also interesting about our products is we source our pecans from Bergeron Pecans Shelling Company, and it's located about 4 miles down the road from Alma Plantation, where we source the sugar for our spirits. So it was really important for us to be authentic and local and transparent with where we're sourcing our products from. And I go into Bergeron's, and I'm able to go and pick my pecans, and I see the women in there doing shelling, and it definitely gives me a sense of pride and a responsibility, and creating jobs, and just knowing that I know exactly where every ingredient is coming from, and I think that shows in our products. So I'm just very proud of that.
Yvette, that's a perfect segue into what's probably going to be my last question because we're running out of time. But you and your family also believe in the importance of local and have built the community around Baton Rouge. Can you talk a little bit about the programs you've instituted for the community?
Well, Cane Land has definitely done their share of outreach, and we've definitely knew that Baton Rouge was going to be our home simply because of the rum agricole piece. The RHUM, the cane juice, had to get to our facility quickly. And Baton Rouge, again, is just, they're so extremely supportive. It is the capital of Louisiana. Down the way in New Orleans, we have a tremendous following, and we actually have one individual who is employed by Cane Land who specifically works that New Orleans environment because it's definitely a scene that we want to capitalize on. But I think if anyone knows that Cane Land is owned the Alma Plantation, the source, we're actually doing that distillation and bottling right in Baton Rouge. They're proud to have us there. And there's no shortage of charitable and philanthropy events going on, and we're just trying to let everyone know that we're here for the long haul, and we want to be involved and take advantage of any of the opportunities that are presented to us. So I think that involvement in the community, especially for our area, is extremely important. So we're appreciated and, to be embraced there at the time.
Well, there's great passion in your voice, and Yvette Bananno-Tharp is Director of Everything Delicious for Cane Land Distilling. They obviously in the distilling business, but she is working on and developing wonderful praline rum cakes and spiced rum pecans, working with the LSU Ag Center Food Incubator, and has done some wonderful work with the community in Baton Rouge. Don, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap us up.
Oh, you did such a great job of wrapping it up. Yvette, your website again for our listeners?
Yeah, it's www.rumyum.co. rumyum.co.
Well, really, thank you so much for joining us. So a link to her website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight. You can also hear all of our past and future programs on foodandwineinsider.com, and also participate in a short survey telling us what guests you think you'd like to hear on our program. And we're also happy to report we're now available on iTunes as well. Yvette Bananno-Tharp, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, I appreciate it, John, and thanks for stopping by and seeing me at the food show. I hope you guys enjoy the praline rum cakes and spiced rum pecans there. And if you need more, just shout out. We'll be more than happy to ship them to you.
Good. Thank you so much. To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Cabbage can help. Cabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Cabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Cabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry, and with $4 billion in funding, Cabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Cabbage at cabbagewithak.com/food and wine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/food and wine.
Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions. All Cabbage business loans are issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah-chartered industrial bank, member FDIC.
You are listening to Ann Daw and Don Mazzella, and the program is Food and Wine Insider via AMFM247.com or on iHeartRadio, as well as Roku Television. You can listen to past shows at foodandwineinsider.com.
And I'm really glad for our next guest. He has a unique story to tell. He's Mike Koch of Firefly Farms, and he's here to tell us all about it. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Well, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Ann Daw to talk with you. Ann, take it away.
Thanks, Don. By way of a little bit of background, Mike Koch and his partner Pablo Solinet founded Firefly Farms in 2002. It's a handmade goat cheese business in Western Maryland. Mike, again, welcome to Food and Wine Insider.
Thank you, Ann. It's great to be here.
Before we get into the farm you bought, I guess about 15 years ago or so, please tell us what you were doing.
Well, ironically, we purchased the farm as a country home. I was in the middle of a corporate career, and Pablo was a culinary professional cooking in kitchens in Washington, D.C., and it was 1997 when we bought the farmhouse and the acreage surrounding it, and almost immediately started thinking about farm-based business and what we now sort of look back and affectionately call a bucolic exit strategy from the city. So it took us several years to do the renovations that we needed to do on the home and the land, and did a couple of scratch business plans for various farm and food-based businesses. And through just several serendipitous happenings, ended up with a couple of goats that we were milking, and we started to experiment with cheese making in our farmhouse, and the rest, I suppose, as they say, is history.
So you buy this great farm, your neighbors have some goats, and you begin making cheese for yourselves. What did you find was interesting about then raising goats and making cheese at that time?
Well, both of us have farming family roots, and so there was a certain attraction to reconnecting to the land, and both of us were also passionate about food, and this was, the late 90s, 98, 99, when we were first, making cheese. And the food movement, I'm doing air quotes as I speak, was really just beginning. And as we started to consider different businesses to potentially start, cheese came on our radar. And Pablo is a very accomplished chef and culinary professional, and I brought to the table a bit of chemistry from a liberal arts education, and so we started to collaborate in a really, I think, productive way around not just the aesthetics and the taste of the cheese, but the chemistry, the microbiology that was going on as we manufactured the cheese. So we really started to enjoy ourselves, and friends from the city would come and visit, and we would serve them cheese on the dinner table. And it wasn't long before people were commenting, "Whoa, where did this cheese come from?" And we would smile sheepishly and say, "Well, it came from our cellar. We made it ourselves." So we decided to go full bore in 2000 and incorporated our business in that year. And it took us about 2 years to stand up a licensed commercial creamery, which allowed us to then begin commercial manufacture and sale of goat cheese in the fall of 2002.
I think our listeners will really be interested in hearing some of the things that you had to do to really move forward and become cheesemakers and create a product that essentially you're going to sell.
It's a great question, and if I were able at that moment to answer in the way I am now, with 16 years of history in the rearview mirror, I might not have moved forward. But at the time, this was 2000, 2001. The regulation around cheese making and food in general was a lot less, and we're now in a post-Food Safety Modernization Act world. So at the time, we were really dealing primarily with our state dairy control offices to review plans for the creamery, have them approve it. We were learning a lot about HACCP and GMPs, good manufacturing protocols, doing a lot of sort of research and investigation of packaging, which we were basically doing ourselves. We had some early misses with packaging, including some, self-printed labels that ended up bleeding ink all over our lovely fresh chev. So you learn a lot in the early days. It's interesting you mentioned the animals and farming, and how, more commonly you have farmers who enter the cheese business as a way to add value to a commodity product. We sort of did exactly the opposite. We knew we wanted to be cheesemakers from the start, and for the first 5 or 6 years of the company's existence, were farmstead only because it was the only way we could source milk. Farmers are very, very conservative, as I'm sure you know, and convincing a farmer to leave their milk market and sell milk to an unproven cheesemaker who's just starting up is essentially impossible. So Pablo left his job and moved full-time to Garrett County, and we bought 30 Nubian goats and grew that herd to 450. So there was a lot of learning on both sides of the fence, as it were. There was all sorts of learning about regulation and the product and the chemistry and the aging. As you may know, and the cheese world is a very nurturing and supportive world, so we made connections early on and were able to pick up the phone and call others that were in similar paths and got so much help in the early days around the way that we were managing our aging room, the way that we were managing our make process, and equally, on the farming side, and gosh, in hindsight, I think that the two of us were absolutely crazy, buying these goats and putting them in a barn and managing the first kidding season. It was quite a lot of work. We ended up then selling our herd in 2006 to one of the farmers that we source milk from currently, and became a creamery-only model, which is the model that we were aspiring to from the very beginning. And we now aggregate milk from 6 family farms, all within about 30 miles of our creamery out in western Maryland.
Yeah. I want to say again, we're talking to Mike Koch, and he founded Firefly Farms. They make handmade goat cheese. And I do want to return to the cheese community, and we'll do that in just a minute, because it is a very strong community. As you say, it's a very nurturing community. I've been many times to the American Cheese Society meetings. You also have the Maryland Cheese Guild in your state. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but I was really curious, when you bought the farm, was the farm already named Firefly, or did you name it Firefly, and if so, why?
It was not. It was a aging old family farm. It actually reminded me of the farm that I would summer on in Iowa that my grandfather and grandmother raised their family on. And it had sat idle for many years, and so we basically brought it back to life. It was not named Firefly Farms. We came upon that name in the process of starting the business. We have a back deck, and behind the back deck is a open field of goldenrod and wildflowers. And in the dusk, in the evening, as the sun goes down, the fireflies lift off of the goldenrod and the grasses and the other flowers and just begin to light. And it was just gorgeous. It looked like a sort of horizontal Milky Way right there above the meadow, and we knew it was Firefly Farms.
There we go. It sounds incredible. So let's come back to the advice you did seek in establishing your business, and from whom or from where did you get that advice? Because yes, raising goats is one level of complication. Making cheese is another. And again, there's the American Cheese Society, very nurturing, lots of producers all across the country, and you have your Maryland Cheese Guild. I'm just would love for you to tell our listeners about that advice and what was that all about? So,
I'll start by saying at the time, when we first started making goat cheeses, and we started with 3, our Allegheny Chev, a Mary Goat Round, and our Mountaintop, we, as luck would have it, attended the American Cheese Society conference that first summer in 2002, which was in Washington, D.C., and met a lot of folks that would become advisors and mentors and friends. David Gremmels and Carrie Bryant from Rowe Creamery, Kathy Strange from Whole Foods, Jennifer Bice from Redwood Hill, Mary Keene. I could go on. The community is really approachable and really supportive. As well, we met Margaret Morris from Glengarry Cheesemaking and Dairy Supply, who ended up becoming our supplier for cultures and wrapping papers and other such things that are needed in the cheesemaking process. And, a couple of things happened at that ACS conference that were ultimately significant for us. We ended up winning a blue ribbon for our Mountaintop, and our Mary Goat took an award as well, which sort of created a spotlight and catapulted some of the original interest in sales and sales growth. And we also then created these relationships that we used sparingly because we were respectful, but, also watched, Peg and Sue at Cowgirl Creamery, Mary Keene at Cypress Grove, on and on and on. We looked up to these folks and realized that in the Mid-Atlantic, there was this hole, essentially. The West had some maturing goat's milk and cow's milk artisan producers. The Northeast had some maturing producers. But at that time, in the Mid-Atlantic and further south, it was really sort of an open field. So we really just sort of redoubled our commitment to, we think we can do this. And we don't just want to be a cheesemaker. We want to be the cheesemaker in the Mid-Atlantic. And really developed a view that was long. And as you know, I think one of the things that's not necessarily known as well as it should be by consumers is food businesses are capital intensive. And when you're in the early days, that, can be daunting. When you're further along in the trajectory, it becomes this sort of wonderful barrier to entry that, you look back on and you think, gosh, I'm glad I'm through that. So there were also relationships that we started with folks who gave us advice on funding organizations. There's a lot of support for value-added agriculture and sort of a relocalization of food system and food system components.
Mike, you make a really great point because capitalization, especially in your type of product, is very important. So many, especially food producers, are able to go to co-pack. You can't really co-pack. You're a handmade cheese product. I thought it would be really interesting for our listeners to also understand what the characteristics are of goat milk cheeses and how it's different from cow milk cheeses, because I think most people think of cheese coming from cows, but there's goats and there's sheep. And because you make goat milk cheeses, talk a little bit about the characteristics and how it's different from cow's milk cheese.
Sure. So compositionally, goat's milk is almost exactly the same in terms of percent of fat and percent of protein. But the fats in goat's milk are distinctly different. The majority of the fat in goat's milk is short-chain fatty acids versus the heavier long-chain fatty acids that are in cow's milk. And the simple way that I always illustrate that point to consumers and friends is, if you take a bucket of raw cow's milk and you leave it alone, the fat will separate. It's long chain and buoyant, and it will come to the surface as cream. Goat's milk, that will not happen to the same extent. Goat's milk, the fats are much smaller and much more incorporated. It's a very different kind of fat. And so that is the driver behind consumers who find goat's milk tolerable and goat's milk cheeses tolerable in the situation of allergies and lactic sensitivities. Often it is those fats that are triggering that sensitivity. And so there's a growing market of folks who seek out goat's milk and goat's milk cheese and other dairy products because they're easier for the body to process and less likely to trigger some of those allergies. The other thing I'll say is, goat's milk cheeses can be bifurcating, right? You approach consumers and they either love goat's milk cheese or they, sort of recoil because their experiences with cheeses, goat's milk cheeses, is they're gamey or they're barny or there's that sort of distinct goatiness. And, we smile now. We've sort of become famous for making not goaty goat cheeses. That goatiness in flavor often is the direct result of the breakdown of those same short-chain fatty acids in, the chemical process called lipolysis that occurs as cheeses ripen. And that's accelerated if you take raw goat's milk and you transport it over great distances, or it's frozen before it's made into curd, or, all sorts of things. And so we have these beautiful cheeses that will often be tasted, and consumers will say, are you sure this is goat cheese? And we smile and say, yes, of course it is, because we have 6 family farms all within 30 miles. The milk comes to us directly. It's processed into cheese within 2 days max, usually shorter than that. And that breakdown, that fat chain breakdown is a lot less apparent.
Mm. Again, we're talking with Mike Koch, from Firefly Farms. They make handmade goat cheese. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about where you sell your cheeses today?
Sure. We have a handful of retail partners: Whole Foods, Wegmans in the Mid-Atlantic area, Mom's, Balducci's, independent gourmet shops that are too numerous to count. We're fairly well exposed now in New York. We're at Zabar's, for example. We've been in Italy and the Flatiron and Chicago. We're slowly making our way out into the West as well. The other type of customer that has proven to be very successful for us, we sell to Sweetgreen in the Mid-Atlantic, and they are one of many emerging fast casual chains that are actively sourcing with intention. They met us, the 3 founders of Sweetgreen met us at the DuPont Circle Farmers Market many, many years ago and started to buy our fresh chev for their salads, and the relationship grew from there. And we are now the fresh chev that is served on the Sweetgreen salads throughout the Mid-Atlantic and into Philadelphia. And there are other similar sort of relationships we have with, for example, Silver Diner, which is a chain of restaurants in Washington, D.C. Chef Ipa and his team are similarly committed to sourcing locally. And so those are our biggest customer segments, the fast casual dining, the retail, and then we have relationships with your more traditional wholesale distribution organizations. And through those distribution relationships, we are in restaurants and specialty independent gourmets, and frankly, have gotten to the point where we lose track of where those distributors take us, and it's become an effort to keep relationships and keep right. the support that you can give full.
Well, and there's certainly a complexity as you sell through the distributors because you're a perishable product. How do you manage the age of stock? And I was just curious if you have your own sales force or you use brokers. How do you manage the age of stock, and how do you sell into the retailers?
With not all distribution relationships are equal, as I'm sure you know, and so as you're doing this over the years, you learn that there are characteristics of distribution partners that work well, and there are some characteristics that don't work well. I'm pleased to say that we have a lot of really effective distribution partners that understand the delicate nature of soft ripened goat's milk cheeses. Many of those distribution partners are produce distributors who know well perishables. And so we often will manufacture to order. There are a number of distributors in the cheese world that put in place special order processes. So we can essentially manufacture the soft ripened cheeses to order, and in so doing, ensure that what we're taking to the distributor is just wrapped and packaged and has the maximum amount of shelf life and freshness available to them and their customers. And, you know, the other thing that comes to mind is we started our business with fresh and soft ripened for all sorts of cash flow reasons that, you know, I'm sure, Anne, you understand well, and are now at a point where we're also selling into market cheeses that age for a longer period of time. Our Cabra La Mancha ages 10 weeks, our Black and Blue ages 6 months, and we're developing cheeses that will age a full year or more. And those, of course, are much more stable and have a much longer shelf life to them. We started with just an inside sales force. To answer the second part of your question, it was, you know, basically myself and Pablo and others in the company who, you know, other duties as assigned would manage sales relationships with customers. And we now have our first full-time salesperson who started in January of this year. And about the same time, we embarked upon our first broker relationship to assist us with penetration in the New York and Northeast. She would say that she's not a broker, she's outsourced sales, and I am sensitive to the difference, right? So she does feel like a member of the team, and that's been a very effective strategy. This is the food business. It's all about relationships and a face and follow-up, and all of that makes a difference in the long run.
And I wonder if you could give us like 30 seconds on sustainability, because it's very, very important to you.
Sure. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, we approach sustainability in 3 different dimensions, you know, economically sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and socially or culturally sustainable. So, you know, economics, one of the sort of things that became obvious to me as I was more experienced in this world, the cheese world, is how few people actually make money, and no one really wants to talk about that. And that is probably the topic of a whole nother radio show that we could go into around the true cost of American food and the bias that consumers in America have developed to, you know, assume that available and cheap, inexpensive food should always be there. And environmentally, we invested in a solar installation. We are actively conserving energy. We recycle. We think about the byproduct of cheese making whey in the same fashion, or actively trying to reuse whey through donation to local farmers or spreading as nutrient on fields. And then socially, we believe that, you know, there's a reason you hand make cheese, and it's because people do that in not big, fancy stainless steel machines. And Firefly is in a part of the world, a part of rural America, where jobs are needed. And so we always, you know, think from that perspective. We want to put people to work. We want to give them wages that they can afford to build a home and a life and save for their futures and invest in our community. So we constantly, my team thinks about what we do from a sustainability perspective, and all of those dimensions are important.
Yeah, we've been talking with Mike Koch. Your website, and do you also sell from your website?
We are in the process of relaunching our website. So at the moment, the selling online is not active, but yes, we will reactivate that in the fall as we head towards the holidays. Yes, sir, fireflyfarms.com, and it's in the midst of a relaunch, but there is an initial phase of content there and plenty for folks to go and engage with. So fireflyfarms.com.
Mike Koch, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, Don.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.